Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. John Slifka was born with spina bifida. Luckily, it only impacted his legs, but it meant a life that would be navigated in a wheelchair. Not that that has in any way slowed John down. John in many ways is a poster boy for a can-do attitude. He recently spent 5 years in a newly formed role as a Connecticut governor's liaison to the disability community, which provided a public forum to discuss the range of issues that people face: employment, housing, education, and so much more. But most of all, this is a personal story and a far-ranging discussion about life, disability, connection, support, dignity, and grace. John, welcome to this Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Thank you for allowing me to be here, Pat. I really appreciate the invitation. As far as my story goes, I was born and raised in West Hartford. I was born with spina bifida, which is a birth defect, and I grew up, as I said, here in West Hartford. My parents made sure that wanted to make sure that I had as much of a quote unquote normal life as possible, and because of them, I was, in an attempt to be modest, I'll use this word anyhow, but I was a trailblazer in the town and the state in many ways. I was the first person, one of the first persons in a wheelchair to be mainstreamed through the public school system. I was the first person in a wheelchair to try out for a high school tennis team in the state of Connecticut. I was a March of Dimes poster child for a brief time in the 80s, which led to, amongst other things, my mother starting the first ever wheelchair sports camp in the Northeast. Through the help of one of the people I was on a poster with, who was Yvonne Lendl, former #1 tennis player in the world, and I grew up. As I said, I grew up here. I after graduating high school, I went to college down south. Moved to Florida for 10 years. After graduating, came back to Connecticut in late 2009 with my wife. After being here for a few years, the governor of the state asked me to join his administration in a cabinet level position as a liaison to the disability community in 2014, and I served proudly in his administration for 5.5 years. That was the first ever position of its kind, cabinet level, in the state. So again, accomplishing a first that had not been done before. And I still work for the state of Connecticut as we speak for the Department of Aging and Disability Services. I work directly for the commissioner here. I'm married. I have a two-year-old daughter. She'll be 2 years and 4 months coming up in a week or two. And that pretty much brings us up to date. I'm sure I left a lot out, but I know you only have so much time. So,
No, when you were serving for the governor, what were some of your goals with that position?
So I was given that position as a blank slate. It was my position to create, and so when I came in, I quickly learned a lot of issues that cross disabilities, if you will, in the areas of particularly employment, housing, transportation, and education. Those are the 4 areas that I had my hand in across the time that I was there. I primarily focused on employment because it was I don't want to say it it was a simple one to pick on, or to get involved in, because it had the scope of touching everything else.
Yeah.
And so I really focused there because everything fed into that. If you could create transportation and education and the right housing opportunities for persons with disabilities, it would lead to employment for them. And so it was all sort of a roadmap that ultimately led to employment, which was a daunting issue to take on, and certainly not one that is solved across the board. But I met some wonderful people that I'm still in touch with, not only in state service, because I work with them now, but outside of state services. Great hearts, great minds, and we didn't accomplish as much as I would have liked. But I was only in the governor's office for a short time. For 5.5 years in politics can seem like 15 minutes in a lot of ways.
Do you think there's a reticence on the part of employers to hire somebody with an obvious physical disability?
As opposed to an invisible disability, certainly.
Yeah, because I think everybody has disabilities of one sort or another. Mm-hmm. But when it's obvious, or where you're in a wheelchair, or you have trouble walking, or a brace, or anything like that, all of a sudden you are much more visible.
Sure. I think that, you walk in already with sort of a check mark next to you in many ways, and you're forced to work harder and prove yourself, not just in the job, but even in the I think in the interview process, just to get and earn the job. And I think the reticence also comes from, in general, a lack of education in terms of statistics that are out there that prove that hiring persons with disabilities is a positive thing for the workforce. I think a lot of companies have a fear of having to spend money, or a substantial amount of money on reasonable accommodations, and that has also statistically been proven not to be the case. You can make reasonable accommodations for very little to no money, and I've seen it firsthand in the state of Connecticut and across the country.
Often on Bump, I talk to somebody who hits a cataclysmic point in their life and has to pivot as a result. But you've been living with this since you were born. What words of wisdom do you have? What would you like people in general to know?
Well, for me, a lot of what I've become as a person stemmed from my family. My parents and my older brother, they were determined that my disability was not going to define me. It was certainly and is certainly a part of who I am, but they were going to make sure that I led as quote unquote as normal a life as possible, and I can't thank them enough for that. I owe everything to them. My wife is very much cut from the same cloth. She's not going to treat me any differently, and has not treated me any differently because of the disability. Surround yourself with people that will help you turn your disability or your challenges into a strength instead of a weakness. For me, that started with my family, and I would like to think that in the friends that I've surrounded myself with, they treat me in that same vein, where they look at my disability as a strength and not as a weakness. I think that can go such an incredibly long way to maintaining a positive mindset when dealing not just with a disability, but with any challenge.
You were on the tennis team. Talk about that.
That was an incredible experience. In high school, the first high school I went to had the best high school team in the state for many, many years running. And in spite of that, I wasn't going to let that deter me. I had played tennis for the last several years and wanted to give it a shot. And so I approached the coach of the team, a lovely man named Jim Solomon, who's a dear, dear friend to this day. And I said, listen, yes, I'm in a wheelchair, but I want to try out for the team. And instead of saying why, Jim's approach was why not. And just as a bit of background, in wheelchair tennis, the only rule change is that a player in a wheelchair gets 2 bounces. Every other rule is exactly the same. And so once Jim learned what the rules were and what accommodations he would have to make, he allowed me to try out for the tennis team. I sadly I lost all 3 of my tryout matches, but Jim allowed me to be the scorekeeper for the team because he still wanted to find a way for me to be involved.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.